There was certainly a shock when Amber Guyger ended up actually getting sentenced to jail time in the shooting of Botham Jean. That was really shocking, but it wasn't the last shock in this case, because we just found out that Joshua Brown, a key witness in the trial, someone who lived across the hall from Botham Jean, has also now been found dead. And some elected representatives, including Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, are saying that we need to get to the bottom of this. There must be an investigation at what is, best case scenario, an incredibly suspicious timing for another person to be shot. So let me give you some of the details on this. Joshua Brown was killed, this is Friday, at his current home, the Atera Apartments, about 5 miles from his former complex where he, Guyger, and John all lived. Authorities have not said whether there's any connection between Brown's death and his testimony in the trial. Local police discovered Brown lying on the ground outside an apartment complex with multiple gunshot wounds on Friday night. Witnesses said they saw a white sedan fleeing the scene shortly after hearing gunshots. So, Brooke, we were talking about this before the show. Obviously, we don't want to jump to any conclusions.
For sure.
But timing can look unsuspicious or suspicious, and this is tending more towards the second.
I never want to be a conspiracy theorist. I usually hate all things that could possibly even just be chopped down to a potential conspiracy. I hate it.
I agree.
This is weird, and I don't even think, you don't have to think that hard about it. This is bizarre that someone who the prosecution kind of described as one of the only people who was willing to come forward, that needs a conversation on its own. Because what does that mean? Who else was out there? What does that mean?
Well, and what potential information will we never know about?
Right, but yeah, in such an important case where the police weren't acting fairly. They weren't, there were things from the beginning, and her fellow officer started deleting text messages for whatever reasons she did. It was a weird situation. And someone who spoke out against her ends up dead right after the trial ends is scary and bizarre. It could also not be connected whatsoever. It also happened right after the,
it's been a big year for interesting timing in deaths. That's all we're saying. We're not saying anything crazy. We're not saying, for instance, that the same sort of police department that would try to hide the evidence and protect her from any sort of justice, probably expecting, considering every precedent we've seen, that it would work. Shockingly, she's gonna go to jail, at least for a little while, that there would be some sort of revenge. Not saying that, but it's not impossible to imagine. Anyway, that is the whole purpose of why you would have an investigation, to try to find out. And that is what some politicians are pushing for. So I just want to cite just a couple to show you that this has reached the highest levels of US government, with AOC tweeting, just when we caught a glimpse of justice for Botham Jean, much of it feels stolen back with the murder of Joshua Brown, a key witness in this case. My heart breaks for his family and for everyone touched by this tragedy. We must get to the bottom of this injustice. We also had Kamala Harris tweeting out, Joshua Brown's selflessness and courage brought some justice for his neighbor. We grieve again learning of Joshua's murder. I pray for his family, his community, and all those impacted by this tragedy. We demand answers. And just really fast, because I know what the internet is like, we can have an issue with Kamala Harris's past involvement in things like this, but this is right. I'm just trying to head it off.
I mean, it is
She's
just
right
absurd.
In this case. And I think
absurd.
Julian Castro also tweeted about this case. I didn't see any others. It's possible that they did. If they did, I'm not trying to leave them out. I'm not MSNBC. These are the ones that I saw this morning.
To be fair, she's right in a lot of instances, and
just this one.
Collectively, almost the entire United States has been cheering her on. Her in every time any congressional hearing exists. So like the idea that now that she's running for president, it's like we have to remind you that she's good at her job is absurd. And every single politician has done something that somebody is not going to like. And I think that
my favorite politician's never done anything wrong.
That is not true. In this instance, I just don't want to be, like of course that's the right thing to say, you know, like.
Yeah. Well, and the terrible thing about cases like this and Epstein as well is that there is no way to raise any questions without seeming like a conspiracy theorist. You just can't. But so what is the alternative? Silence?
No,
that means that
I'm glad that you're talking about it on your show. I think.
Well, it's obviously important. We have to.
Yeah.
And so if people do that, if in their fear of seeming weird or extreme or whatever, they just don't talk about this, then either it was a regular shooting, which is a tragedy of its own and definitely has to be solved, or it could be something darker. And whichever it is, obviously it's incredibly serious. And so that's why I'm glad that it wasn't just like Amber Guyger goes to jail, or is going to, there's a hug, and then we move on as a nation. We can deserve to spend some of our time making sure that there's not more injustice piled on top of what is still injustice.
Yeah, I agree, completely.
Yeah. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.